Sound test, 1, 2, 3, sound test.
Toby Williams. I'm the development manager for the East team. I'll be chairing the meeting. I've just got some pre-live commentary before we do the introductions. So members of the public can hear and watch everything that you are doing this morning. You should treat this meeting like a meeting being held as if it were a public meeting and people are watching remotely. Please note that the meeting chat is available to view by people who join the meeting as presenters. This is anticipated to be officers and speakers in the room, objectors and the applicants. Please ensure your microphones are on mute at all times unless you're speaking. Background noise can be distracting to those watching the meeting via the live stream. Please make sure your phones are on silent. The meeting chat is neither confidential nor private and can be subject to a freedom of information request. Before we go live, are there any questions at all? Great. Okay, do you want to go live, James? Thanks. Okay, so I'll be chairing the meeting. I'd like to welcome you all to the City Council's Development Control Forum taking place at 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 16th of April. Can I ask the councillors to introduce themselves going round the table, please? David first.
Thank you. Councillor David Levine, Trumpington Ward.
Councillor Katie Thornborough, Petersfield Ward.
Councillor Sam Carling, West Chesson Ward, which this application falls into.
Great, thank you. And I've received apologies from councillors Bagent, Pora and Nesta. Are any of the councillors here today aware of any other apologies? No. Okay. The officers permanently at this table for this meeting are Alice Young to my right, who's the principal planner, who's managing the application, Chris Connor to my left, committee manager, and James Goddard to Chris's left, who'll be the meeting producer. We are joined by representatives of the applicant. Tim, can you please introduce your team?
Good morning. Yep, my name is Tim Price, Director of Planning at Savills. On behalf of Reef Group, Olivia Frew, who's Development Manager, and Lisa Liu, who is Effective Acting Architect for the client, Urban R.
Great, thank you. And we're joined by representatives of the petitioners against. Please, can you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Nick Flynn. I'm a resident of Lillywhite Drive, and I'm joined by
Lucy Tucker, also a resident of Lillywhite Drive. Sorry. Yeah, Lucy Tucker, also a resident of Lillywhite Drive.
And I'm Josh Grantham. I'm the infrastructure campaigner for CamCycle, supporting better walking for West Chesterton.
Okay, thank you. And we're joined by representatives of the petitioners in support. Please, can you introduce yourself?
Finn Stevenson, resident of Corona Road.
Great, thank you. So if anyone has any problems hearing me or anyone else during the meeting, please alert me by waving your hands, and we'll try and resolve the issue. So just a bit of housekeeping to remind people, please keep your microphones off unless you've been invited to speak by the chair, and once you've finished speaking, please kind of press the button to take the red light away. The meeting is being recorded and it will be available for public viewing for 6 months from the date of the meeting. The aim of the forum, and we haven't done one of these in a while, but it's to allow early discussion of planning issues and to explore the scope for agreement and compromise between all sides. No decisions are made today. The decision on the planning application itself will be made at a forthcoming planning committee. The format of the forum is set out on the agenda, and I'll assume that most participants are aware of that agenda and its structure, but it includes presentations from the applicants first, and then both sets of petitioners. The planning officer will then give an overview of the application, and then there'll be an opportunity for questions from members and some summing up from all sides. Hopefully that's clear. So firstly, are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Carling.
Thank you. Yeah, as I said, so this application falls into my ward, and I've done quite a lot of liaison work almost with residents, but the case officer has been copied into the majority of correspondence. I had a site visit with, I think it was Nick and Lucy. Again, Alice was present at that. I was also the one that let Finn know that this was happening in order that he had an opportunity to do a petition and come in so that we could have the proper discussion. So just to make people aware, I've had a lot of liaison work going on here, but I remain discretion unfettered on the application.
That's great, thank you, Councillor Carling. Great, so we'll turn to the applicants then to deliver your presentation, please. You've got 15 minutes. If you kind of run over that time, then I'll kind of quietly nudge you to complete your presentation. And it goes without saying that if all participants can keep to the time this morning, I'd be very grateful. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Toby, and you'll be glad to hear we won't be going anywhere near 15 minutes, I don't think. We're mainly here to listen, but I thought we'd just introduce the plan for today from our side. We'll give you a very brief presentation about where we've got to. As you know, this is a live application. I think we commenced work with a community listening event back in May 2023. As Councillor Collins alluded to, there's been lots of liaisons with different groups over that time and is ongoing. So the principal piece for us here today is present where we've got to with the scheme and why, and then really for us to listen to the debate, because we understand it is of critical importance to lots of people locally. We understand there's different objectives and requirements. So yeah, I'll let Lisa present where we are with the application submission, and then how we can potentially look at taking things forward over the next few weeks and months as we move towards a decision.
Thanks. We'd just like to thank everyone for allowing us to be here today and to be able to present our scheme. I thought I'd just give a brief introduction into the site itself. So it's located the north of Mitcham's Corner. You've got the green space of Jesus Green on the south, and then you've got the access of the site on Milton Road, which is one of the main arterial carriageways. The current site is very internal facing, and it also has a vast amount of hardscape, which is in the form of surface car parking. What we're trying to propose in our current scheme, which has been submitted, is to turn this hardscape into actual landscape space, public landscape space that people are able to use, neighbours, local community, everyone. And the current site, as it exists, does not have any connections to Gilbert Road, as Fellows House Hotel owned that third-party land. It does not have any connections to Corona Road, nor does it have the secondary one to Lily White Drive. But as the design process has gone on, we have, of course, looked at Mitcham's Corner SPD. We have noted the fact that those possible connections are in the scheme as pedestrian and cycle routes. And that has been one of the main discussion topics in our consultations with the public. As Tim has noted, back to May of last year, where this was one of the main topics that was brought up. During this process, we've obviously had 5 consultations. We've had engagements with the local community. We've had 2 youth engagements with Milton Road Primary School. So we've tried to involve ourselves as much as possible to understand what the views are and how that can influence the design of our proposal. What we have proposed in the scheme is the ability to have these access points, as in they have been designed into the scheme. Whether or not they are actually accessed is dependent on discussions that we are having here today. So the one to Gilbert Road, because it's third-party land, that is outside of our control in a way. It's outside of our give. But the access points to Lily White Drive and Corona Road are. So we've designed it so that the routes to those places, in terms of landscape, in terms of levels of the site, is able to be achieved. But again, that's something for discussion, and it's something, because it's going to be used by the local community, because these are access points that will be important to everyone that's around the site, it's a discussion point that we are opening up to those who are actually using it to be able to inform us of what those are. And as I said, we have had these conversations, as Councillor Carling had alluded to, they have been ongoing, and there have been two varying points of views. I'll just quickly show the route. So this one's through the Games Corner on the northern part of the site to Gilbert Road, the one on the southern part of the site to Lily White Drive, through the Linear Garden, and then finally on the south to Corona Road. That's also through our outdoor working and landscape space. So I'll just stop sharing there, and hopefully that was a quick summary, and give it to the petitioners to speak.
I think just to conclude, if I can do, Toby, is just, I suppose we've been very conscious of the aspirations, as alluded to in the original SPD, around enhancing permeability and connectivity. And that was kind of where we probably started this process. Also very cognizant of how different parts of the community have different feelings around security, safety, requirements of access, and how that may affect them or not. So it's been a very difficult one, this, where you're trying to balance, we've got what some might say good planning and objectives, whilst you've got specific concerns about people, about their daily life. That's very difficult for an applicant team to try and balance that and say, well, who's right, who's wrong. So we're doing our best, we're here to listen. But I have to say, Reef have been open from day one that they're trying to do what almost the majority of the community, or what will better suit the community. I think that's as far as we can take it at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Tim and Lisa, that's most useful. So we'll turn to the petitioners against now for your presentation. You've got 15 minutes, and again, I'll nudge you if you're going over that time slot, but please try and keep to it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so my name's Nick Flynn. I'm a resident on Lily White Drive. I'm joined by Lucy, who's also one of my neighbours on Lily White Drive, and Josh from CamCycle. So we are a group of residents that want better connections to the local area and better walking for West Chesterton. And we've been supported by the Cambridge branch of the national walking charity Living Streets, as well as Cambridge Cycling Campaign. And I'll start by saying that I hope one thing we can all agree on is that most residents in Cambridge want to live in a neighbourhood that's easy to walk and cycle around. And in fact, Cambridge City Council recently went through a large engagement process to develop a design code for neighbourhoods in the north of Cambridge. And that report that was published earlier this year noted that one of the highest priorities for residents is a safer and better connected cycling and walking network for local trips. So today I'm asking you to help deliver on that vision for residents in West Chesterton. So what is the problem that needs to be addressed? Well, the Westbrook Centre forms part of a large block bound by Gilbert Road, Milton Road and Victoria Road. And it's not possible to cross this by foot. And that lack of connectivity has several important consequences. First of all, it creates circuitous walking routes. So although Lily White Drive is only around 100 metres from Chesterton Community College and Sports Centre, every single journey from Lily White Drive involves a long detour around the Westbrook Centre towards a single point of access at Milton Road. So this 100-metre distance becomes almost a 15-minute walk. And that limits the area that can easily be covered by foot from Lily White Drive. So this map shows the distance that can be covered within a 10-minute walk at various points in Cambridge. And as you can see, the area within a 10-minute walk of Lily White Drive in blue is significantly smaller than in other parts of Cambridge. Another important consequence of the lack of connectivity is that it makes it difficult to avoid areas that are particularly dangerous for walking and cycling. For example, the most direct route between Victoria Road and Milton Road is via Mitcham's Corner, via this stretch of narrow pavement next to 2 lanes of fast-moving traffic. Now, notably, this is the most direct route to school for children who attend Milton Road Primary School, who live within the catchment area on Primrose Street, Corona Road or Greens Road. Is this how you want our children to walk to school? So this City Council has recognised the lack of walking connections in the area and has proposed improvements within the Mitcham's Corner Development Framework, which is a document that went out to public consultation in 2016 and was adopted as part of the Cambridge Local Plan in 2018. And this proposes new walking and cycling links between the Westbrook Centre site, here indicated here in pink, and Corona Road, Lily-White Drive and Gilbert Road. The planning history in the area has also acknowledged the poor connectivity and walking connections in the area. A design and conservation panel meeting for the Lily-White Drive development in 2014 said that a landlocked site presents any design team with limitations. However, there's an opportunity to improve permeability, providing some issues relating to third-party ownership can be overcome. A future link with Gilbert Road, if only for pedestrians and cyclists, would be a significant breakthrough, and thorough exploration of this possibility is to be strongly encouraged. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't possible to deliver that link as part of the Lily-White Drive development. However, Lily-White Drive was built in such a way that links could be put in the future. For example, the street by 46 to 51 Lily-White Drive leads to a gate to the Westbrook Centre site. And it's also worth pointing out there's a gap left in the fencing and the landscaping, suggesting that there was intention to enable that to be linked up again in the future. The Fellows House Apart Hotel also went through planning application in 2014. And in their design and access statement, the developer said that a new street would allow long-term pedestrian and cycle routes to be connected through the Westbrook site towards Victoria Road. And that new street lies between the main Apart Hotel block and a row of townhouses. This application was granted on appeal, and in the appeal statement, the developer says the appellant would be willing to facilitate a pedestrian through route. However, third-party land is required, and the owner of that land, the Westbrook Centre, will not permit it or entertain proposals. So we have local planning policy supporting the creation of these new links, major planning applications in the area providing passive provision, but claiming that the Westbrook Centre would not cooperate. Now is the opportunity to put the final piece in the jigsaw, and it's perhaps the only opportunity we'll get in our lifetime to do this, and add those new links to Corona Road, to Lily-White Drive and to Gilbert Road. And it's not just me who thinks this is a good idea. We've started a petition in favour of these new walking links, which has gained almost 400 signatures on the change.org platform. And those are residents like myself of Lily-White Drive who are frustrated at the difficulty in walking around their local area. Also those from the greater West Chesterton area who would also see the benefit to shortening the distance they have to walk in the local area. And those from greater Cambridge areas that recognise that this is not just a local issue. Improving walking and cycling networks and promoting walking and cycling has wider benefits for residents throughout Cambridge by its impact on reducing congestion, air pollution and carbon emissions. So Cambridge City Council planning policies support adding these missing links. Policy 5 of the Cambridge Local Plan, which is Sustainable Transport and Infrastructure, says that development pinch points, barriers and missing links. Policy 22, which is the Mitcham's Corner Opportunity Area, says that developments should promote and coordinate the use of sustainable transport modes. And Policy 80, which is supporting sustainable access to development, says that developments should be conveniently linked with the surrounding walking, cycling and public transport networks. And areas where public transport, pedestrian and cycle movement is difficult or dangerous will be improved. So I hope I've convinced you that this is an area where walking and cycling is difficult and it funnels people into dangerous areas like Mitcham's Corner. Cambridge County Council policy also supports adding missing links. So Cambridge recently adopted the Active Travel Strategy, and Policy 10 of this strategy recognises that there are known gaps and barriers in the rights of way and walking and cycling networks. This includes missing links between provision. It says we will seek to identify and address these gaps and barriers to greatly enhance provision, provide complete and safer routes, and encourage new users to take up active travel journeys. And it's worth pointing out at this stage that in their response to the planning application, Cambridgeshire County Council Highways requested the provision of new pedestrian and cycle link to the site from Corona Road, which will provide a more direct link to the development for pedestrians and cyclists wishing to access from the southwest, the reason being to provide a safer and more convenient means of access to the development site for vulnerable road users. National policy also supports connections to the surrounding area. The Department for Transport's Manual for Streets recommends creating networks of streets that provide permeability and connectivity to main destinations and a choice of routes. It says that internal permeability is important, but the area also needs to be properly connected with adjacent street networks. A development with poor links to the surrounding area creates an enclave, which encourages movement to and from it by car, rather than by other modes, and I'm sure that's not something any councillor here would like to encourage. It also goes on to say how attractive and well-connected permeable street networks encourage more people to walk and cycle to local destinations, improving their health while reducing motor traffic, energy use and pollution. So these new connections would provide more direct, quicker and safer walking and cycling routes. There'd be easier access to the Westbrook Centre, not just for employees, but also for visitors, and that includes residents from across Cambridge wishing to access the new community facilities that the developer is proposing to provide, such as the Games Garden, the cafe, and the community space. They would also direct residents within West Chesterton who benefit from more direct routes, and this chart shows one example for showing the reduction in time from Lily-White Drive. And it would also give residents the option to bypass the Mitcham's Corner area by going via Corona Road and the Westbrook Centre site, enabling safer routes to nearby schools. So we understand that some residents have concerns, and particularly about the impact on crime. And I'm sure they might quote the a statistic which is from the Secured by Design Homes Guide, which in turn cites this book by Professor Rachel Armitage, who found there's an increased risk of crime with footpaths that are narrow, enclosed, long, secluded, not overlooked, behind properties, poorly lit, poorly maintained, and rarely used. And this photo is taken from that book and the study that was used to reach that conclusion, showing what you might describe as a dark, dingy alleyway. However, Professor Armitage goes on to argue how this is not an issue, this is not a black and white issue. And residential developments can have high levels of connectivity and experience low levels of crime and disorder where certain design principles have been applied. She also argues that appropriately designed footpaths can be included within a development without increasing the risk of crime, and recommends that pedestrian design lines should be identified and well-considered footpaths should be designed into the development. To ensure footpaths are well used, they should connect the locations residents need to reach, be suitably maintained and adequately lit. So these design principles for crime prevention are also included in the Department for Transport's Manual for Streets. So to summarise, they include that footpaths should be wide, open, short, overlooked, well lit and well maintained. And I think it's definitely possible to achieve that at the Westbrook Centre site. There's also the possibility of further measures to further enhance security at the Westbrook site. So it will have 24-hour security and CCTV, and there's also the option, if it's deemed necessary, to restrict access at certain times, for example, overnight. And it's worth pointing out that similar links are very, very common in Cambridge, both between residential areas such as Warren Road to Eastfield, Windsor Road to Darwin Green, within the Lily-White Drive development, Leys Avenue to Arbury Road, and Warwick Road to Windsor Road, but also between residential areas and employment sites such as Red Cross Lane to Addenbrooks, Knightley Avenue to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, Riverside to Tesco, and Limedale Close to Arm within the Peterhouse Technology Park. And I understand that this last example was also subject to some initial opposition from residents. Many of these links have been put in or improved within the last 10 to 15 years. And once these connections are in place, they're extremely valued by residents. And one example of this is the link not far away from the site between McGrath Avenue and Shire Hall. Now this runs behind some properties and it also features steps. So it meets neither modern accessibility standards or crime prevention principles. Nevertheless, it was the subject of an intense campaign to protect the path from closure upon the decision to sell the Shire Hall site. And I'm confident that as the benefits of these walking links become more widely appreciated by the community, they'll become as valued as this path to Shire Hall. So I'm asking you today to take the right path, the one on the right-hand side here, with a safe connection between streets, rather than the one on the left, where people have to walk on narrow footpaths next to busy main roads. We need councillors to take a long-term strategic decision. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to add missing links to the walking and cycling network, to enable more direct, quicker and safer walking and cycling routes. Please stand up for national, county, city and local planning policies that promote walking and cycling and aim to provide missing links. Not just the policies I mentioned, but other policies that depend on improving walking and cycling, such as those on air pollution and climate change. and ensure links are designed in line with modern crime prevention principles. So thank you very much for listening and the opportunity to present to you today.
Thank you, Nick, and thanks for coming in on time as well. Okay, so we'll now turn to the petitioners in support. Finn, I'll hand over to you. Please, if you could try and keep to within 15 minutes, that'd be great.
Yes, no problem. We'll keep to 50 minutes. So I'm Finn Stevenson, resident of Corona Road. Thank you to the chair, members of the committee for the opportunity to speak here today, and to Councillor Carling for letting us know about the meeting so that both sides of this discussion can be heard in the same forum. I'd also like to acknowledge the contributions to this presentation from the residents of Corona Road, Lily-White Drive, Victoria Homes and Corona House, many of whom are packing out the public gallery today for this meeting to ensure that their support and views are also heard as part of this process. Before getting into the detail of the objection petition, I'd like to ensure that the context and background of this issue is captured on the record. So the original plans published by the developer in early 2023 included the addition of these cut-throughs, connecting the commercial site to neighbouring residential areas, including Corona Road and Victoria Homes. The developers, as they've outlined in their initial presentation, then carried out an extensive 5-month consultation period with local residents, including multiple listening events, multi-channel feedback collection, and detailed engagement with stakeholders and residents groups. This consultation concluded that the cut-throughs should be removed from the final planning submission based on overwhelming and united opposition from local residents, including an apparent majority of the Lily-White Drive residents, the supposed beneficiaries of the plan. We're very concerned that a small DCF petition is now being used by a small number of residents, some of the few who supported this idea in the first place, as an attempt to reopen the issue, despite the strong opposition encountered in the democratic consultation process, and that personal interest is now being presented under the guise of a planning policy objection. The objection petition has referenced policies 5, 22 and 80 from the 2018 Cambridge Local Plan. However, we maintain that quotes from these policies have been taken out of context, and that when read in full, the quoted policies do not support the addition of these cut-throughs and are not violated by the proposal in its current form, which is the requirement for a DCF. To give some specific examples, Policy 22 does indeed seek to promote and coordinate the use of sustainable transport modes. However, this same policy describes the Mitcham's Corner gyratory as an unpleasant and difficult environment for pedestrians and cyclists. Unfortunately for all of us, the redevelopment of Mitcham's Corner and the gyratory is not within the scope of this planning proposal. And so simply adding another entry point for pedestrians and cyclists directly onto a dangerous and unsuitable gyratory hardly constitutes promotion of these sustainable and important methods of transport. Policy 80 is even more clear-cut, stating that any new access point must ensure, and I quote, that there is safe and appropriate access to the adjoining road, pedestrian and cycle networks. As a high-frequency accident hotspot with no cycle path and notoriously narrow and dangerous pavements, as the petitioners have actually pointed out themselves, and an established issue around cycle-pedestrian conflict on those narrow pavements in a one-way system, the junction between Corona Road and the gyratory clearly does not meet that requirement for safe adjoining access. Beyond the procedural concerns and flaws in this submission, I think it's also worth reviewing some of the important objections which led to these cut-through plans being removed from the initial proposal in the first place. While we are, of course, collectively concerned for our privacy and the preservation of our currently quiet residential areas, there are a large number of objective factors that would make these additional cut-throughs inappropriate, unsafe, carried out in the Mitcham's Corner area. So,
Just making sure your microphone is working. Yeah.
Sorry, I've lost my place. Given the setting, there we go, that is louder actually. Given the setting of a development control forum, I've summarised the most significant concerns relating only to local planning and development policy. So firstly, These cut-throughs would worsen already dangerous cycling patterns on Mitcham's Corner. Mitcham's Corner is a high-traffic, 3-lane, one-way gyratory system that, as per the Council's 2016 development framework, creates an unpleasant and confusing environment for pedestrians and cyclists. There are a number of well-recognised and documented issues around the safety of cycle and pedestrian use in the gyratory, with the required detour around the one-way system and high-flow vehicle traffic, resulting in a significant proportion of cyclists riding on the pavement instead. The pavements of the gyratory are particularly narrow, often too narrow for even pedestrians to pass in opposite directions, and there are frequent, often serious incidents involving a mixture of pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles. Cambridgeshire County Council accident data shows there were more than 20 significant accidents involving cyclists and pedestrians on Mitcham's Corner between 2017 and 2021. Adding a thoroughfare via Corona Road would significantly increase the number of cyclists and pedestrians entering and exiting the gyratory at one of its most dangerous points. It's a blind corner. And it is important to note that there is no cycle path at the intersection of Corona Road and the gyratory. So these additional cyclists would instead be navigating the pavements or the gyratory road itself. Adding additional foot and bike volume to a traffic feature that has been consistently recognised as dangerous and already struggles to cope with existing usage would be irresponsible and predictably lead to a further increase in the rate of serious accidents. This reality compares starkly to the current access point to the Westbrook Centre from Milton Road, which benefits from wide pavements, segregated cycle paths in both directions, and excellent visibility. If I could get the slide shared just for the first few images to allow everyone to see this. So this is actually very similar to the image showed by the other petition, showing that how narrow the pavement is around Mitcham's Corner gyratory. The challenge, of course, is that while this is narrow, adding additional traffic to it in both directions will only make that problem worse. And the recommendation of the Mitcham's Corner Development Framework to add these thoroughfares was assuming that this entire portion of the gyratory would become a pedestrian-only area. Taking this single piece in isolation makes no sense. If we could have the next set of images, please. Yeah, so these photos were all taken this morning, actually, just before we left. And of course, on the left-hand photo here shows the very common pattern on Mitcham's Corner, which is because it's a large one-way gyratory system, cyclists navigating it, instead of going all the way around when it becomes not a shortcut at all, cycle on the extremely narrow pavement against the flow of traffic, where there's already insufficient room for pedestrian use. This is obviously already dangerous and will be made only worse by adding both more pedestrians and more cyclists to this exact point on the gyratory. And you can see that from both perspectives there. If I could have the next slide, please. This, as a contrast, is obviously building work undergoing on Milton Road, but is the area around the existing access point to the Westbrook Centre, with segregated bike paths in both directions, wide accessible pavements, and straight line visibility up and down the road at the point of entry and exit from the site. Thank you. So, Corona Road itself is also too narrow to support a practical and safe cut through to the Westbrook. A report commissioned by the City Council in 2015 notes that national guidance from the Department of Transport has set out clear requirements for pavement widths in the public realm. As per this document, pedestrian pavement should be 2,000 millimetres wide, with 1,500 millimetres being the minimum width under most circumstances, and 1,000 millimetres being the absolute minimum where there is an obstacle, and even then only for a maximum length of 6,000 millimetres. The pavements on Corona Road, we have measured them, are consistently narrower than the absolute minimum acceptable width of 1,000 millimetres, and at no point along the road do they meet best practice requirements. These guidelines exist to ensure safe and inclusive use of pavements, with the minimum width being set at the narrowest size that still enables a standard width wheelchair user to safely access the pavement. The narrow pavements are therefore not only unsuitable for even moderate volume walking use, but would also from the outset exclude disabled users and create accessibility problems for existing residents. The problem of insufficient pavement width would be further accentuated by the likely usage pattern of an entry and exit point to a commercial life science development with a large number of on-site jobs, and usage concentrated into narrow commuter windows at the beginning and end of the day, leading to predictable overcrowding and space conflicts in those times. There is also no safe way to partition a section of Corona Road off for use as a segregated cycle lane. The existing road is only just wide enough for a normal sized vehicle to carry out a multi-point turn in order to drive back out of the cul-de-sac onto the gyratory. If narrowed any further, this would no longer be possible, and if cars aren't able to turn in the road, the only option will be to reverse onto the busy gyratory, which is obviously unsafe. It directly contravenes Rule 201 of the Highway Code and would add even further danger to cyclists and pedestrians attempting to navigate the gyratory in both directions. If we look at the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is, again, from this morning, showing the narrow width of both the pavement, the road itself, and the standard manoeuvre for exiting the road, which is a multi-point turn between two parked lines of residents parking. There's clearly no room to safely implement even a pedestrian path here, let alone pedestrian plus cycle path in both directions, while maintaining safe access to even just Corona Road itself. Forget the problems entering the gyratory. So in addition to these very real problems with the suitability of the surrounding streets, there are also a number of issues associated with clearing the existing green margin of the Westbrook Centre to allow for the passage of these thoroughfares. The current Westbrook site includes a thin margin of trees and shrubs separating the commercial area from the residential streets surrounding it. Although sparse and poorly maintained, this green margin provides a valuable barrier to noise, air pollution, and overlooking. Given that the proposed redevelopment of the Westbrook site is intended to take at least 4 years of heavy construction work and will result in a building with more windows than the existing structure, this green margin is of more importance now than ever. The vegetation separating Corona Road from the Westbrook requires an increase in width and density to help make the redevelopment process more tolerable for local residents. Instead, the proposed thoroughfare would dissect and destroy a large portion of the existing green margin, significantly reducing the pollution and privacy protection that it offers to residents at a time when it is most needed. This would also likely impact the mature trees currently growing within the border in line with the existing pavements, which are situated within the Castle and Victoria Road Conservation Area and as such have legal protection. Any attempt to create a bike and footpath through this border would reduce the ability of the developers to mitigate some of the disruption and impact on their new neighbours via new and improved planting of thicker vegetation on this border, and would increase more generalised objections to the redevelopment from neighbouring properties as a result. This is visible on the next slide, please. So you can see looking down to the green margin at the end, and then a close-up on the right of this border with the protected trees, and frankly not a particularly thick border, but useful nonetheless. To create a path through this in both directions would require the destruction of pretty much the full margin, removing all benefit that it currently adds. The Westbrook Centre site is also significantly taller than surrounding buildings already, including the residential properties on Corona Road. We also understand that the proposed new building will have a greater proportion of glass frontage on the elevation facing Corona Road and surrounding neighbourhoods, and maybe even taller than the existing building mass. There is already a clear risk of loss of privacy through overlooking, and this impact would be made considerably worse by breaking through the existing green margin that currently provides limited visual screening. Clearing some of the existing vegetation to make room for the thoroughfare would materially increase the loss of privacy that the redevelopment will already impose on surrounding residents. Perhaps most frustratingly, there is no real need or reason for these cut-throughs. They offer no apparent tangible value to surrounding residents, hence significant local opposition, and the developers have confirmed previously that no additional access is required or desirable for their proposed development plans. The The existing main entrance and exit to the Westbrook is situated less than 250 metres away from the point at which Corona Road joins Mitcham's Corner, which hardly represents a meaningful shortcut in accessing the town centre, and work done by a fellow resident, Howard, of Corona Road, looking at transport times and the impact of cut-through, shows that it mostly comes out in the wash, and there's very, very few destinations which would actually see a faster walking time.
Ben, we're approaching 15 minutes. Could you finish up now, please?
Yes, got about a minute to go. The final issue I want to raise today is that of crime and crime prevention. This has been a significant concern for local residents of what's currently a peaceful and safe residential area. The crime risk associated with adding thoroughfares to cul-de-sacs is well established, and the Cambridge Constabulary have been very clear on this issue. Their designing out crime officer has reviewed the planning proposal as part of the evaluation process and drew the following conclusion. Our recommendation would be to not add any additional footpaths to the area. Cul-de-sacs that connect by footpaths to other parts of development, often referred to as leaky cul-de-sacs, experience the highest levels of crime when compared to crime areas within crime levels within a true cul-de-sac. Crime in this kind of design can be 110% higher than crime in a true cul-de-sac, and therefore should be avoided. So to conclude, these cut-throughs have already been the subject of an exhaustive consultation process and were subsequently removed from the planning proposal based on overwhelming local opposition. An absence of perceivable benefit other than for a select few, serious safety concerns, significant privacy impact, and a real risk of increased crime in a vulnerable area. Without radical redevelopment of Mitcham's Corner and the gyratory system, there is no way that these cut-through proposals could be considered safe, reasonable, or in keeping with local planning policy. The redevelopment of Mitcham's Corner itself is out of scope of this planning proposal, and so taking a small element of it in isolation is unhelpful and unrepresentative of its goals.
Finn, can you please finish now?
Yes, sure, apologies. We all support improved safety and access for cyclists and pedestrians and would be very keen to see improvements made, but the way to do this is to deal with the dangerous gyratory, not by arbitrarily adding new access points to inject additional traffic into an already very dangerous system. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. I think as I said earlier, it's difficult for people to listen if there are interruptions and try and keep the discussion tempered in terms of how we approach it. Please, that goes for members of the public as well. So we now turn to the planning officer to give an update on the application. Over to you, Alice.
Thank you. So the planning application was received on the 28th of February 2024 with neighbours and consultees notified of this application on that date. Several site notices were put up advertising the application on the 8th of March. The consultation is due to expire on the 25th of April, and currently there are 70 representations, 53 in objection, 11 neutral and 4 in support of the proposal. The current representations mainly focus on connectivity and permeability, obviously the subject of the petitions, scale and massing, and the impact on residential amenity. Officers have worked with the applicant team throughout the pre-app process to explore how the site can improve connectivity in the area in accordance with the local plan policies and Mitcham's Corner Development Framework, SPD. Mitcham's Corner Development Framework, SPD, as outlined by the petitioners, outlines the constraints and opportunities of the area, including several links to and from the Westbrook Centre site to enhance permeability. That was published in 2018. So officers and the applicant team have come across roadblocks to delivering links, including land ownership issues. We hope that some of these roadblocks will become unblocked, but want to understand more fully residents' views on the delivery of the links. The development has been designed, as the applicant team has outlined, to not prejudice links coming forward in the future, and the applicant team are open to delivering links any links will obviously be secured via a planning condition or Section 106 agreement, and there has to be several tests that have to be complied with, including the deliverability of those links. We have gone out to consultation and received consultee comments from both Highway County Development Management Control Department and the County Transport Assessment Team. The Highway Development Control Department have no objection to the proposal, but recommend a condition to deliver a cycle and pedestrian link to Corona Road. Given the safety concerns raised by residents, we'll be discussing this matter further with county highway engineers on the safety of this link. The Transport Assessment Team have a holding objection at the moment, as they need further information regarding the trip generation to and from the site. They have also recommended contributions to the GCP sustainable transport improvements on Milton Road and towards the Mitcham's Corner improvements to be required as part of the development to improve sustainable connections from the site to the wider area and support the reduction in car parking. They've said the amount will be agreed with county before the determination of the application, but we don't have any set figure yet. So that's where we are currently with the application.
Great, thank you, Alice. Okay, so we now move on to members' questions and issues arising. This section of the meeting is tabled to last approximately 30 minutes. Two councillors have joined us online as well. Those are Councillors Smart and Councillor Bennett. Good morning, councillors. We'll try and deal with your questions as well as they arise, but probably deal with those questions arising from the councillors in the meeting first, if that's okay. Before those questions arise, members are reminded not to express a fixed opinion upon any aspect of the presentation content that you've seen today, or to any responses coming out of the DCF meeting, which might give a rise to a view that you've a closed mind to the proposals and application. However, open questions are encouraged to add value to today's purpose. So, over to councillors. Councillor Thornborough.
I'm very interested in how children get to school, and I know that the Chesterton Community College has a really, really good reputation in Cambridge, and but I don't know that area that well. And so I think that encouraging and making safe routes for children to go to school is a principle that we should all be looking into and trying to find every opportunity for that. So, and I think I assume there are family homes all over this area, and what I'd like to understand a bit better about how children. I think it was made clear about families in Lillywhite, how any new walking connections would improve their access to school. But are there families who live off Victoria Road that go to this community college? And what sort of routes, let's not talk about Corona Road, but further up the road, Victoria Road, there's a big Victoria Park. So how would those families get to the school? Are there other cut-throughs and routes through, or do all of the children, the families have to go onto the current main roads? I'd just like that clarity, please. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thornborough. Tim, if I could turn to the applicants to give your view on that, and then we may well turn to the petitioners.
I certainly can't speak for every family. We've obviously, as an applicant team, spent quite a lot of time around this area. I'm not aware of any cut-throughs that would take you from Victoria Road straight into the college, so I would expect that people either have to go east or west, and that's round Mitcham Junction, or up one of the other, Stretton Avenue, or one of those other roads that takes you north and then round. So it is probably a somewhat circuitous route, as I think Nick's presentation showed you. You would either go east or west and have to do that same kind of loop round, and that would take you to the same, whether it's Chesterton College or whether it's Milton Road Primary. I expect, as I said, I'm not a resident, but I expect that is probably the route.
Thank you, Nick. I mean, my understanding is that there's currently a route down Garden Walk that lots of Chesterton Community College students would use when the college gates are open, or otherwise they're going round and anti-clockwise up kind of Milton Road and round. Would the objectors like to add anything to that question?
Yes, so my children attend Milton Road Primary, and my son's in year 1 there, and one of his friends lives on Greens Road, and he cycles with his mother to school via Mitcham's Corner on that narrow pavement that we talked around. And so that would be the current route. The link to Corona Road would provide an alternative. Instead of going through that narrow stretch, which Finn recognised, is a dangerous section, you go up Corona Road through the Westbrook Centre site, then either come out at Milton Road, the existing entrance to the Westbrook Centre, or if it's achievable, through a new link to Gilbert Road. But even if the link to Gilbert Road is not achievable, there would still be an alternative route which avoids the Mitcham's Corner area by going via Corona Road and then the existing entrance to the Westbrook Centre site. And I mentioned in the presentation that those streets on Victoria Road and off Victoria Road are within the catchment area of Milton Road Primary School.
Thank you. Finn, have you got anything to add?
No, I wouldn't want to try and speak for the school attendance in general. I guess the concern from our perspective would be, as outlined in the presentation, it is a dangerous area on that gyratory, but it will become more dangerous if it's adding further traffic to that exact point. So sort of would raise a concern about the idea that being able to even take that relatively short cut through the Westbrook via Corona Road would actually be a safer route for children versus, essentially trying to navigate up another busy street with limited access and a sort of additionally dangerous corner.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Is it the case that the reason for trying to stop these cut-throughs is main safety of pedestrians and cyclists on the Mitcham's gyratory? Is that really the centre of the case? Crime was mentioned, but more or less in passing. I'm just trying to establish whether that is the main thrust of the case. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of works going on in Mitcham's Corner in years to come, and you did say that that's not relevant to this, but it kind of is, in a way, I would suggest.
Finn, over to you.
So the gyratory is part of it. Crime is another part of it. We're slightly compressed for time, otherwise been able to expand on that a little more, as is privacy and the nature and quality of the area. I contest that the development framework on the corner is difficult to consider in this context, because it's a document that's already 10 years old, is no closer to being implemented that anyone can tell. And while it did propose additional permeability for the area, taking just that component that was intended to link to a new pedestrianised zone and access-only traffic area, which the part of the gyratory that we're all referring to in the SPD is supposed to be no through traffic at all, was the recommendation. So to take a 10-year-old planning document that's not currently being implemented and say, well, it proposed cut-throughs, it did. If we were sitting here debating, taking away the one-way traffic zone, turning it back to a single road as it used to be, and adding a pedestrianised section with through access only to the top portion by the Portland Arms, would be an entirely different discussion, and I think it would find a different reception. But it's not what we're discussing. We're essentially discussing taking an area and a traffic system that has been recognised for over a decade as dangerous and unhelpful, and rather than addressing that point, just adding more volume into it at a particularly dangerous spot. So I think, it would feel irresponsible to assume that by just adding pedestrians and cyclists, eventually the other problem gets sorted. There appears no sign that that's happening anytime soon.
Okay, thank you, Finn. Do the objectors want to respond to any of those points?
So I guess maybe I misunderstood, but I think David was indicating that at some point that development may actually happen on Mitcham's Corner, thus you have a much safer area, and therefore the links up actually are not going out onto a ridiculous, the situation that we have currently. And it is kind of relevant to think about that development, which hopefully will be happening. And so thinking about, putting this in place, I think is very relevant to that case.
Am I able to just ask a clarification question on the response?
Sure thing, yep.
Just to be clear, you're suggesting that because it may happen in the future, we should sort of add the throughfare now, so that if it does happen, it will become safe. So it would sort of start dangerous, but may become safe. Is that the?
Of course.
So I think there's benefits now, here and now, with the road layout as it is now. The link through Corona Road would avoid that dangerous Mitcham's Corner area. If Mitcham's Corner is redesigned, there's still benefits. In fact, the benefits are kind of would enhance. You'd have an additional more people, encourage more people to walk in that area. So I think it's still relevant now, and it will be relevant if Mitcham's Corner is changed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Levian, does that answer your question?
Well, it opened a little box there, didn't it? Yeah, I mean, the positions are fairly clear. I just thought I'd put that one out. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from councillors in the room? Councillor Carling.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, everything to do with Mitcham's Corner, whenever you start looking at it, many boxes open, I can assure you. And it's an area that we as the 3 ward councillors would really, really love to do something with. But the problem we have always come up against is, although the directory system is absolutely horrible if you are not in a car, if you're in a car and you know where you're going, which is not always the case, it's very efficient at sorting traffic out. And so because of the amount of traffic going through the area, trying to get it changed is virtually impossible at the moment. If the amount of traffic going through that directory system fell, then we could do something. So we had some initial preliminary discussions. I mean, not that I want to mention it, but the whole city access congestion charges stuff. If that had gone through, we may have been able to make things happen. That is not happening. That is gone, which, and there are obviously lots of benefits to that. And there's also, we can't do anything with this in the corner for a while. So we're always weighing these things up. Sorry, just to provide that context. I had a couple of questions. One is primarily for Finn. The other one's a bit more open. Finn, my one to you is, could you give us a bit more detail, because obviously you are on Corona Road, but we've also heard concerns about the Gilbert Road link, and I wonder if you're able to voice where those concerns are coming from a bit more, because I think your presentation mainly focused on the Corona Road one, understandably. And then the more open question is, we've had this suggestion floating around, I think Nick mentioned it in his presentation, of sort of compromise solutions, like having a gate that it locks itself at a certain time of night, for example. And I understand obviously, Finn, that wouldn't help with the safety concerns you're raising, but would it help with the crime concerns? I'd just be interested to hear everyone's views on that, and particularly from the applicants, what perhaps you've considered in terms of the different options that there are, so we've all got a clearer picture of where this discussion is.
Great, okay. Finn, so I'll turn to you first to deal with those 2 matters, then I'll turn to the applicants, and then I'll turn to the objectors for any follow-up commentary. Thank you.
So I'll start with the existing question. There were originally 3 throughfares in the initial proposal. So one through Victoria Homes, I believe, one through Corona Road, one through Gilbert Road. The Victoria Homes one disappeared earlier than the other 2. So the remaining 2 that are being discussed, which by the way, I think is a good thing. The residents of Victoria Homes were extremely concerned about it. The 2 that remain in discussion are Gilbert Road and Corona Road. Our understanding of the Gilbert Road cut through is that it would essentially require either a compulsory purchase order or the voluntary donation of the land by the Fellows Hotel. And so, a significant objection to that comes from the fact that the Fellows Hotel don't want to do that, and it's hard to imagine how that becomes part of of the proposal, whether it's supported or not. So I suppose we've focused our summary on the bit that is essentially the council's to decide on ultimately, which is the Corona Road cut through. Hence that focus. Does that answer the first question?
Yeah, I think so to an extent. I mean, I was just sort of aiming to tease out if those roadblocks weren't there, what would the issues that residents have be with putting it in, essentially? If
For Gilbert Road?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to kind of air those, really.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, as a Corona Road resident, I think, the Gilbert Road's cut through would have minimal impact on us, but I know there were considerable objections from Lillywhite Drive residents about the sort of concept of a leaky cut through, crime concerns, privacy concerns, the ability for safe areas for children, etc. But I'm not a resident there and wouldn't want to speak too much to those perspectives.
Okay, so the second question was around the compromise solution in terms of managed access. If you have any commentary on that before we turn to the applicants.
Yeah, so we have noted a couple of sort of managed access suggestions as comments on the petition. Some are essentially that sort of key fob access via a gate. It casts some doubt on the idea that this is some generally useful kind of pedestrian and cycle access for the community. If kind of it would still work if you had to have a fob to access it, it makes it hard to see how that supports the idea that it's good for the area in general, as opposed to a sort of small number of fob holding residents. I think the idea of time-based access still creates, still involves the vast majority of the problems that we have outlined, because actually they would be at sort of peak commuting times when obviously the gate would have to be open. So the safety concerns would still stand, and as actually would the kind of the crime risk. I think there was actually a short period of last year where the boundary fence at the bottom of Corona Road was damaged, and you could sort of climb over it, not quite through it, but climb over it. During that time, there were more than one serious accidents with drunkenness and trying to navigate that boundary to and from the Westbrook site, and ambulances did attend, and it was literally only broken for a couple of months before it was repaired. So I think any form of access at the end of that road will still lead to the same problems, and if it was something that is generally good for the broader community, then I don't think private fob access is appropriate or supports that goal.
Okay, thank you. So we'll turn to the applicants now. I don't know who's going to lead on the answer. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to discuss in terms of security. Obviously, this is due to be transformed into a life science development, so security is going to be kind of paramount to both the tenants inside and UBS, who are the ultimate holder. So we're likely to have 24/7 security with CCTV, and to the point raised earlier, we've also got on board lighting designer Studio Fractal, as well as our landscape designers, Camlins. So we'll definitely, and we've also obviously been consulting with the local police station. So we'll be making sure that we're making any accesses very safe for users. I think, do you want to talk to the next bit?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think in terms of access, if it isn't a open access 24 hours, then in terms of restrictions or limitations, I think it wouldn't be a fob access. I don't think that would be an appropriate function. I agree entirely with what Finn's just said. I think it would be more of a timed solution. So if the majority of the conversation today seems to be around kind of connectivity for the local populace and whether that's going to work, whether that's going to your recreation, whether that's families going to schools, then you would think that that could be dealt with within a time frame of an indication it's open 7 till 10 in the evening, and then it's closed. So that doesn't change everything that Finn has just said around views on safety of routes in terms of its physical characteristics. But I think in terms of how you might control something from a timing perspective, that would be far more appropriate than a fob-based or personalised access, which I don't think any of us would support as an appropriate method.
Thank you, Tim. So I'll turn to the petitioners in an objection. Lucy, it looks like you're going to lead on the
Thank
response.
you. I think we need to focus a little bit on the Gilbert Road access. So clearly, even with the absence of Corona Road, which opens up access for a lot more of the community, the safety and accessibility for those leaving Lily-White Drive, but also those coming into the new biohub, is enhanced. Kind of, the amount of people arriving by bike, etc., which I know is of kind of importance in the design. I believe that would be enhanced. I think there has been commentary about the Fellows House have essentially said no, so there's not much we can do. Actually, as we saw within their appeal, there was a statement which said we would be willing to open this up, but Westbrook are saying no. This proves to me that now is the time to get these access routes done, because that was something that was potentially promised, and now they're saying, well, maybe not, we're worried about safety. There are ways to design out the safety concerns on that side as well. There is a pavement, and I think, I am personally not willing to accept that just because, it's private land, that this cannot be delivered, and also that the landscaping obviously can enable it as well. So I don't think that if, it has to be both or none. I think, there are opportunities on both access routes to deliver something which I think is safer, cleaner, enhances everything that has been discussed today.
Thank you. Just to kind of aid the discussion, my understanding is that the owners of Fellow House have said initially no to cut through the Apart Hotel site. I've reached out to the original planning agent at Carter Jonas to ask them to re-examine that initial kickback, and I'm waiting to hear back from the agent, but officers have taken up that thread of conversation as well. Associated with that historical application, there was a Section 106 agreement with a financial contribution that could have been used towards the provision of the link. Subsequent to that Section 106, there was a deed of variation that the county asked for the monies to be used for alternative purposes. That was at the point that when the Westbrook wasn't coming forward for redevelopment. Now, that doesn't preclude a further conversation with those applicants, but I wanted to make clear that that's the position with that historic section 106. Okay, I've got Councillor Bennett with a question online, and then Councillor Thornborough. I'll come back to you. Councillor Bennett.
I just had, hello everybody. I just wanted to thank both the petitioners before and against for giving up their time to come to talk to us and explain their views. My question was, have we had any advice yet from either the access officer or the design out crime officer? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bennett. Questions for the planning officer?
So we haven't had a consultation response from the access officer yet. We are waiting for those still. And I will chase those up. With regards to the designing out crime officer, they have provided comments. They have said that they agree with the comments from the residents of Corona Road. There are enough access points towards the school. There would not be a requirement to increase the risks for crimes to be committed with the introduction of an additional access route. Our recommendation would be not to add any further additional footpaths to the area. So that's on behalf of the designing out crime officer, and that's published on our website. They've also gone into detail with regards to lighting and other matters to do with designing out crime.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Bennett. So we've got a design out
It does
crime.
indeed.
Yeah, we've got a designing out crime officer who's not requiring an additional link, and counties highways asking for an additional link in terms of Corona Road specifically. Have you any further questions, Councillor Bennett?
Nothing that I want to raise here, thank you.
Great, thank you. I'll turn back to Councillor Thornborough then, please.
I think I'm just going back to children getting to school again, which is a real priority. I think the Gilbert Road access makes a huge difference for me, whether you link up with Corona Road, because for me, if Corona Road there was a link through Corona Road, for me, it would provide an opportunity for families to get off the gyratory, to walk through Westbrook Centre, to go to Gilbert Road, and then to the school. But if the access to Gilbert Road is not available, then there wouldn't be that opportunity. So I think the weight or effort to resolve the Gilbert Road access is really, really important. I think generally it's disappointing when there is an SPD that's been carefully worked out and the opportunities of an SPD is lost. But I can see where the residents of Corona Road who have a cul-de-sac and have moved there with an understanding it's the cul-de-sac, you generally wouldn't know that there's an SPD for a possible development that might affect you. So, you know, it is. I can see it's a real issue for anybody who is blessed with not having through traffic, and then to have through traffic. Although people walking past is different to people driving past, and certainly but cycling is more people coming and going than cars. But I also feel that the city is just being let down by not having a comprehensive walking and cycling strategy that the county council should be looking at through the LTN. When the LTN 20 came out, the government said it was, you know, that we need to look at active travel opportunities, and they need to be these development walking plans and cycling plans that can be consulted on by everybody, because it's not just one site and one school and one road, it's the whole area. It's really it's a bit like the Chisholm Trail has made a massive difference to so many people in Cambridge, not just the people who live at one end of the Chisholm Trail and the other. And the whole issue about the gyratory is such a big issue, and it's really sad that some really good improvements might not go through because nobody has tackled the gyratory system. And as Sam said, it's really, really good for cars, but really bad for people walking and cycling. The level of pollution, the level of accidents, the asthma, you can feel when you're walking there, you can feel the cars going by you, you know, big lorries, all of that. So that's a major problem. And again, that is something that should be looked at for the benefit for everyone. And not knowing what's happening with that is detrimental for the people living and working there. And the same with not knowing what the long-term plans for really improving walking and cycling. So I think that the Gilbert Road access is really, really critical. And again, if things are not put in right now, I think they should be provision for things being improved in the future. So it may be that the residents of Corona Road and other cul-de-sacs off Victoria Road would actually not have the concerns about a cut through if the gyratory changed. But we must remember that it's mainly through development opportunities that we get this chance to talk about this. We wouldn't be sitting here talking about it without the petitioners coming through in this opportunity. So I generally feel that we shouldn't close off better opportunities in the future if we can't actually do them now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate there is some irony to the situation with the owners of Fellows House at the moment in terms of their stated position. Do any councillors in the room have any further questions? No, Councillor Carling.
Not necessarily a question, but just to kind of add to what Councillor Thornberry's said just now, I think we all also have to appreciate the applicants are in a horrible position here, because you've essentially come in to redevelop the Westbrook Centre and waded into this contentious issue that's been going on for some time. So just to recognise that we all recognise you're in a very awkward position here. And so obviously we're grateful for everyone being able to have the discussion, and just, yeah, we understand the problem that you're in as well, and we wouldn't want to hold that against you.
Tim, have you got a response?
Thank you for that, Councillor Carling. Yeah, and I think, as I said at the outset in the introduction, we came with a starting point of looking at the SPD, looking at what the stated aspirations were and trying to work with that. And only then do we then uncover actually lots of different views, which is typically what happens in planning. Keeps me in a job, which is great. I just wanted to be very clear. Toby outlined that the council is looking to engage through different methods with the hotel. The applicant has not rested on its laurels and just said, "Oh, you know, would you do this?" No, okay, fine. You know, we're engaging with them again. We have been engaging. We're trying to see what can be happening. We haven't just taken the first no and then, well, that's it. Well, we can't do it. So I just want to be very clear to everyone. The council is using its methods to try and engage. We are doing all we can. And again, perhaps just for clarity, and it's unfair because they aren't here, but I know their concerns relate to effectively the access point coming through their service yard. So they have some concerns around the safety of users and, again, security issues that they may encounter with people who just have direct access. So it isn't straightforward. As was outlined, you know, they made a commitment at our application stage, which unfortunately now has been diluted somewhat, but we are trying to do what we can do as an applicant, but we have limited powers. So I appreciate, again, what the petition was, you know, we must try and make that happen. We are doing, but it's just not within our gift to make it happen. So as long as everyone has that clarity, because I totally agree that without that northern link, you don't get as much of the benefit. Now, it's a question for everyone around here is, well, is that southern link still of benefit? And that's kind of why we're all here today. So thank you for the opportunity, and just to confirm, we are committed to try and deliver what we can.
Okay. They weren't specific questions, but do any of the petitioners have any commentary on those points? Yeah. Those in objection, please.
So the Gilbert Road link obviously strengthens the Corona link, and the Corona link is the one that is immediately deliverable. So, you know, instead of talking about passive provision, which is what we've done in the past, it's important to act where we can act, and then put as much pressure on through all of our means possible to push for the other important links like Gilbert that are intrinsically perhaps a little bit more difficult. I'd also just like to draw some attention to the gyratory. There were some opinions on safety. That's all they were. When we think about that, the way that gyratory operates at the moment, we'd have to get into all of the different journeys that people take through that gyratory. So, for instance, if you create the Corona link and the Gilbert Road link, that instantly takes journeys off the gyratory. And then other journeys will change the way that they shape through. And then whilst there is a vision for the gyratory in the future, is there actually a small pedestrian improvement that can happen on the joint with Corona Road and the way that functions that supports this application? So I don't think this scheme and the addition of the permeability creates an additional safety risk. And I think the reality of not creating these connections, pushing people away from walking and cycling journeys, ultimately just perpetrates the problem of more vehicles going around that junction. Every time we talk about an additional walking or cycling journey not happening over safety fears, we're putting more cars on the road at the junction that we're talking about safety for. So I just really think that needs to be considered.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Finn, I'll turn to you. I'm conscious that after your response, we're at about 30 minutes. I will ask Councillor Smart whether he has any questions as well, but Finn, first, over to you.
Thank you. I challenge the idea that the safety statements we made are opinions. I mean, the constabulary have provided accident data showing that it's a high frequency hotspot. The SPD itself carried out a systematic investigation of the gyratory and concluded that it was dangerous, confusing, and unpleasant as an environment for both pedestrians and cyclists. So I think it is objectively a poor quality environment for pedestrians and cyclists. I'd like to thank Councillor Thornborough for her comments on the SPD. I think it's worth clarifying that as residents of Corona Road, this is not an SPD that we were unaware of or even opposed to. The majority of residents on Corona Road have lived there a long time, many of whom were deeply involved in that consultation and part of the Friends of Mitcham Corner organisation. The real concern we have about this is that we're taking an SPD that was intended to transform an area in lots of extremely positive ways. I think a lot of residents supported it. I wouldn't want to speak to everyone, but I think there was a strong support for the intent of the SPD and the impact it would have on a dangerous and unpleasant area. The concern we have is the idea of taking a large strategic document that looked at an area in its entirety and made a set of joined up recommendations, i.e., you have to change the traffic feature. You should pedestrianise the Portland Arms section of it. It should be through access only, which would then enable much safer cycling and walking routes through. And then you could make the most of those by increasing the permeability to that feature. The concern from us is that we're 10 years down the line and we're talking about taking just the boundary of that recommendation, where the rest of it doesn't look like it's going to happen, particularly with the congestion zone falling by the wayside, and saying, well, we'll just add permeability without changing the area itself. And I think the safety concerns are therefore very valid, but also I want to make it clear that this is not an opposition to the SPD or a lack of awareness of the SPD. It's an opposition to the idea of piecemeal introduction without the joined up implications of the formal planning work. And I guess our concern to the applicant's point, on the safety of school access via that throughfare. I mean, I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask questions, but it'd be useful to have a data point. How many jobs are expected on the new site, roughly? 1,200. So there's at the moment one entrance. There's potentially would be 2 or 3. So we're talking about sort of hundreds of people an hour, potentially during sort of the start and end of a day. I would really strongly challenge the idea that sending school children down a road like Corona Road, which we've seen is extremely narrow, has no room or potential for a segregated pathway or pavement, that funneling them down that along with what could be literally hundreds of commuters in the same time window is in any way safe or improving their access to school. None of us are opposed. I hope I speak for everyone, so we're all in favour of improving children's access to school and pedestrian and cycle safety in this area. It's in all of our interests as residents to make sure that children and local residents have safe access to schools and surrounding facilities. It's just that this isn't that. We're not talking about making the area safer. We're talking about just adding people to a dangerous area. They're very different propositions.
Okay, Finn, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smart, do you have any questions for the forum?
Yeah, apologies, Toby, for not being there in person. It was my mistake. No questions. I've been listening carefully to the debate, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any councillors in the room with their hands up, so we'll bring that section of the meeting to a close. So we now turn to summing up. So Tim, I'll turn to the applicants first to sum up, please.
Just to thank you again. I know Lisa and Olivia have said this, but thank you to both sets of petitioners for the information that they've brought to the table and the comments throughout, not just today, but throughout this process. We've got to know quite a few of you over the last 15, 16 months. For the councillors as well, for their questions, comments, insight and general contribution to that process as well, particularly the ward members, Councillor Colling and his fellow members. I think in terms of summing up, again, we'll take away what we've heard today. Lots of food for thought. as we set out the outline, we've designed this scheme which can accommodate links. It doesn't accommodate links at present. So yeah, again, food for thought for us, and we'll continue to engage with officers and the local community as and when we can do.
Okay, thank you, Tim. So I'll turn to the petitioners. Again, summing up, no more than 5 minutes, please.
Okay, just want to reiterate how these new connections would support local policies in Cambridge, and they would each work in isolation. So the Corona Road link would provide a route between Victoria Road and Milton Road, avoiding that narrow pavement that we both showed in our presentations. There also, we haven't really talked about the Lillywhite Drive link, but that would work together with the Corona Road link to give residents on Lillywhite Drive an alternative route for destinations to the south. And also the link to Gilbert Road on itself would again work on its own to give residents access to the Westbrook Centre site and the play area, which is directly next to that Gilbert Road link. So that would benefit the entire area of Gilbert Road for children wanting to access that play area. And it would also benefit residents of Lillywhite Drive that want to go via Gilbert Road to the schools of Gilbert Road, the secondary school or the primary school. And as we saw from the Gilbert Road link and the Apart Hotel, the developer there was very keen to provide those links during the planning application. But once they've got permission, things suddenly change and there's not the incentive that was there before. So it really reiterates to me that this is the best time to do it. It's not a case of saying, well, we put passive provision there and we might do it in the future. This opportunity is not going to happen again. It's probably the only opportunity we're going to get until any development happens again in the future. And the lifetime of the Westbrook Centre, I believe, is proposed to be over 100 years. So really, it's the only time in our lifetime to do this. So please stand up for those national, county, city and local planning policies that promote walking and cycling. And the time is now.
Thank you, Nick. And Finn, now I'll turn to you in support. Again, no more than 5 minutes, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate thanks for the forum today and for allowing these views to be heard. And I think hopefully we've summarised clearly the very real safety, suitability, and privacy and crime concerns around the cut through. I wish we were here discussing the redevelopment of Mitcham's Corner and the development and the SPD. We're not, and the development in question is not for Mitcham's Corner; it's for the Westbrook site. Which is something that we cannot change, but we also can't pretend isn't true. And I think while I have the petition's view that now is the time to do it, I have real issue accepting the idea that sort of adding traffic and throughfare to an area that is known to be dangerous in the hope that in the future that is no longer true. I struggle to see as effective or sensible planning. So I think we have established very clearly that the current Mitcham's Corner area and gyratory system is not appropriate for additional cut-throughs and throughfares, and that has been pretty strongly supported all round. I don't think the fact that there's this a very attractive hypothetical future that is not yet materialised and frankly doesn't look like it will. Should mean that we act as though it will happen and kind of accept the cost in the meantime of very real danger to users of these cut-throughs as well as local residents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that kind of concludes the kind of active participation. Just some kind of follow-up notes for people in the meeting then. So following the meeting, the committee manager will draft up the notes of the meeting. They'll be published on the council's webpage, and the notes will also be published and appended as part of the planning officer's report. The planning case officer will contact the applicants and agent after the meeting to discuss the outcome of the meeting and follow up any further action that is necessary. The applicant will be encouraged to keep in direct contact with both sets of petitioners and to seek their views on any proposed amendments. The council will follow its normal neighbour notification procedures on any amendments that do come forward. along with other individuals who may have made representations on the application. The petitioner's representatives will be informed of the date of the meeting at which the application is to be considered by the planning committee and of their public speaking rights. The committee report will be publicly available 5 clear days before the committee meeting. So that now concludes the Development Control Forum. Could the meeting producer please end the live stream and confirm when it's been ended? Thank you all.